What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of Short Shifts, your fantasy hockey podcast brought to you by Keepy Carlson. I'm Shams Benamor here, and we are joined by our frequent new guest, or I guess guest is not the right word. We have filled up the ranks as co-host, Derrick. How are you doing today?
Doing good, thanks, Shams. Hope the same is true for you as well.
Oh, yeah, I can't complain. There was a lot of good hockey that treats us yesterday, so we'll see. We'll try to wade through it, but it was an exciting night last night, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're recording this on Tuesday evening, but on Monday, which was a holiday in the U.S. and in much of Canada as well, we had a whole bunch of games, and one of them in particular treated us to a trio of hat tricks, courtesy of, let's see, make sure I get them all. Actually, I don't know the order they happened in, but I'll go with J.T. Miller in the losing effort for Vancouver, and then Joel Eriksson-Ek and Kirill Kaprizov for Minnesota in a 10-7 win. What a game.
Oh, yeah, it was just goals on goals, and sadly, we do have one cold streak to bring up from there that somehow, out of those 10 goals, got 0 points. If you have a roster, you probably know who it is, but if you don't, you'll hear it later on the show. So to get into our headlines, we'll open up with Morgan Rielly. He tried to have his suspension shortened, but it looks like judge, jury, and executioner Gary Bettman said no, and looks like he's going to be keeping on going. What do you have for insight here, Derrick?
Yeah, it's been pretty common for players who've gotten suspensions in and around this length this season to appeal it from the original decision of the Department of Player Safety, and any suspension under 6 games gets reviewed by Gary Bettman himself, doesn't go to an independent arbitrator, and just like in all the other recent cases, Gary Bettman has upheld the suspension. So one more game for Rielly. He served 4 out of 5. I think from the Players Association and the individual players' perspective, it doesn't hurt to try. You might get some salary refunded even if the decision comes in after the games have been served, and you might get back in a game or two early. But no dice on this occasion. One more game that Toronto has tomorrow night, I believe, that they're going to be playing without him. And for that, one more game at least, probably expecting to see Timothy Liljegren as the power play 1 quarterback, although also, as we'll elaborate on a little bit more later in the show, Toronto has mixed up its power plays a little bit, and there's kind of like a 1A and a 1B at the moment. But right now, Liljegren is getting more time than he would otherwise. I would expect for that, I think it's a Vegas game that Toronto is going to have afterward. When Rielly will return, he will probably go back to taking the majority of power play time.
Yeah, and talking about Vegas, they're getting a big name player back today. It's Shea Theodore. I forget how long it's been, but he's finally back. He was activated from IR, but didn't play yesterday. And he's going to be out. And it's going to be interesting to see because the power play has kind of been split between Byram and Pietrangelo. However, since they haven't played yet and haven't done any practices, we don't know what their power play is going to be. So that's going to be something to keep in mind. But at the very least, is that, even with the injuries and whatnot, they have some firepower there. So, and not to say the least, is that Theodore has some offensive power on his own. So even without the power play, he should have some interesting offensive capabilities to play with those forwards. And then we'll have to wait and see what comes out of the power play and if he could get anything out of that, because those 2D have been kind of keeping it well as of now. Do you have any thoughts on, do you think anyone should be maybe fishing on a trade, or do you think, because probably if I have, he's probably going to be rostered already on many teams because he was just stashed in IR, so I don't think he's going to be available off of free agency. Do you think of him as a worthy add on maybe shallow leagues, or someone trying to fish for, say, if he's cold on the first game to try to get something out of him?
Yeah, my expectation would be that Theodore would go back to a pretty substantial power play share. I like to think, or I have, I guess, thought of Vegas's power play share between Pietrangelo and Theodore as kind of similar to what Tampa's been doing the last couple of years with Hedman and Sergachev. And if one of those players gets injured, all of a sudden the other one, takes up a bigger share. Recently it's been Sergachev who just got injured for Tampa. But on Vegas, Theodore is a really great offensive player. I would expect he is probably on IR in most leagues, but if you are in a shallow league, if someone had multiple injuries and had to pick a drop and did drop him, definitely go grab him. If he has a slow start, a first game or two without a point or without power play time, I would throw a buy low offer over on him.
Oh, yeah, for sure, especially with D being so random. Right now, in my Cacuffle league, right now, I literally only have one healthy D, and it's Matt Roy of all people. So there might be, even if you're in a situation where you have him, maybe there might be some needy teams that might be able to pay a little bit more just to have a plug and play. So, something interesting to keep an eye on, but I'm generally in line with you with that really good comparison with Tampa Bay of how probably they'll get used. And going forward, we have, with lines, everything is kind of shadowed out. If they have a bad game, it might be getting mixed up, but it kind of came out of nowhere. The Senators have shown a completely new top nine that right now they're tied 2-2 with the Panthers of all teams. So you could say it's working. Could you give us a little bit of more insight on what's happening?
Yeah, so as kind of mentioned on the show I did recently, the Pinto line's been doing really well, and while nominally a third line might have been better than that, and what's kind of happened is Pinto and Tarasenko have moved up to join Brady Tkachuk, and that is now being labeled as the first line. So all of a sudden Pinto's gone from third to first line center. Meanwhile, we've got Matthew Joseph, Tim Stützle, and Claude Giroux as line 2, and then Grieg, Norris, and Batherson on line 3. And while Grieg's been doing pretty well lately, Norris and Batherson have generally been the cold ones. So definitely potential to rebound a bit, with whatever this new combo shakes out to be. But I would say it definitely seems best for Shane Pinto now. He's been playing well with Tarasenko, but now he gets a big star on the other side of him in Brady Tkachuk.
I agreed. It's right now, and it's that kind of dance too for Tarasenko. Is that I have him, not to always be talking about my Cacuffle team, but he's just kind of been hanging around as my bottom forward, and he's always just gotten enough points to kind of hang around, and I've always been kind of looking at him with trepidation as that third line, even though they roll a top 9. But if he could stick with this kind of setup, having even with split power play where they don't always commit to one, but if he's playing with Tkachuk, that definitely brings up my interest in Tarasenko and the rope that I was willing to give him. Now, going forward is that, honestly, this is kind of a new thing for me, is that every time I start working on one of these shows, it's like, okay, what 15 injuries we're going to talk about? The headlines are injuries, then we go into the injury section and outjuries and whatnot. Actually, on top of it all, the only real big one was Shea Theodore, who we already talked about. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about backup goalies, because right now in your fantasy leagues, we're rushing to try to get into the, stay in playoff position or try to climb yourself up into playoff position. So you're cutting and trying to make sure you get value of every position, every spot. You can't leave that guy that you have there that's only going to play one game a week. So we're doing a lot more goalie streaming depending on your league. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at a set of goalies. We have mainly backups that might be getting a start here or there, even though just to rest the starter or the back-to-back, and just kind of give you a little bit more of a background on just, which ones that you might want to take a look at that when their start comes up. And then sadly, when doing a research, we have a long list of goalies that maybe you might just want to avoid even if they're going to get a start. So to go on, let's start with the happy ones. We got a quad set of goalies that are what we consider hot. And then just a little bit of insight is that I'm going to use the term quality start, which we get from our friends at Frozen Tools. And basically what it is that if they have a league average save percentage, which is basically a 9-10 right now, or if they somehow face fewer than 20 shots, so maybe if they're playing against the Blackhawks, if they have a save percentage up above 885. So right now we have 3 goalies that would be considered hot. Basically, we have Anthony Stolarz, Jonathan Quick, Calvin Pickard, and Spencer Martin. All of them have at least 3 wins, and then the vast majority of their starts are quality starts. We've kind of talked about Jonathan Quick a decent amount on the show and the mega show, and I think Calvin Pickard has been given a little bit of highlight here or there. Is there any particular goalie that kind of comes up out of here, Derek, for you?
Yeah, I think Stolarz and Quick, both seem like the ones to have maybe more potential value, just because, they're backing up a, ostensibly star goaltender, but, has either not been playing well this season or not been playing well through the course of the last few seasons. So, if the starter, stays in a rut, they can really run with it, I think, on, pretty good teams in Florida and the Rangers. Pickard, the only thing is I think in addition to having to compete with Skinner, he still has the looming threat of if they ever decide to bring Jack Campbell back. And, while the beginning of this season certainly went terribly for Campbell, he has really turned it around in the AHL lately. All it's going to take is, maybe an injury to Skinner. Jack Campbell comes back up, has a few hot games, and all of a sudden that becomes the new story and Pickard's old news again. So I think that, his value is maybe the most tenuous of the bunch. And then, Spencer Martin, Carolina is just, really, again, tenuous as well because, as I've said before, Anderson is a looming, threat to come back. Kochetkov has still generally been playing well. Ranta is injured. Yeah, Spencer Martin could, he played 2 games in a row and won them both, but it's entirely possible he could immediately, get sent down to the AHL tomorrow if Anderson is back and never play another game this season. So, to summarize, Stolarz and Quick would be my ones I'd be considering holding if it was a deep league for goalies or looking for. The others, I'd be a little bit more cautious, only picking them up when they're confirmed to start.
Yeah, good points. I know it's not rocket science, but something to keep in mind with all these 4 teams, and you'll quickly see with some of the others that we're going to list on the cold, is that all of these are strong teams with, even if they maybe not have the defense, they'll have the goal support to help with the wins. So, sometimes we talk about highfalutin strategies and thinking about the quarters, but sometimes the smart thing of just playing a goalie on a good team is just a simple answer to get some nice fantasy value. Sadly, now on the other end is that we have a long list, and I was surprised to hear is that I guess there's a reason why these guys are backups, but here's the list of goalies. Basically, from these is that just to kind of give a little bit of overview, these are goalies on a stretch of anywhere between 4 and 8 games with maybe a win. Many of them don't have a single win or a quality start. And basically what I would have to do is I'd have to look at the mirror and I'd have to be in a very desperate situation, either in rate stats or in a point league where the saves count. These guys, when they start, honestly would be in a position to possibly give you negative points. So these are the goalies that are fit that category are Kevin Lankinen, Scott Wedgewood, Tarasov, Desmith, Vejmelka, Comrie, Dostal, and Soderblom. And the interesting thing here is that with Wedgewood, he had a little bit of playing time as a starter when Ottinger was hurt. Same you could say with Vejmelka, and the others have been mostly backups. Is there anything else to really add with this? Is there anyone that you disagree, or is these people that hell, it's maybe better just to keep a roster spot or a move that in your pocket than risking it with these guys.
Yeah, in a volume points league, I'd keep an eye on Vejmelka. Arizona does still have a good schedule the next few weeks. And, on the drop of a pin, he could become the starter again there. That's like the things were at the beginning of the year. Ingram's hold on the job is not really as secure as a lot of the other starters for these backups here. The rest are, they're backups playing poorly. I wouldn't really be paying them much attention.
Okay, so with that, we close the goalie check-in and head into our commercial break. So stand pat, and we'll be back with you shortly. Welcome back, and as with all of our shows, we're going to close out with our hot and cold streaks. We're going to open up with a household name of Dylan Cozens. So right now we have kind of Buffalo is kind of sadly not really performing as much as people may have thought at the start of the season. But the nice thing is that Dylan Cozens kind of picked it up. He's been kind of seen as a top prospect, or maybe he's out of that prospect title already. But started off well, kind of hit a cold streak, but he's kind of coming back into it right now. He has 4 points in his last 4 games. His even strength line is Greenway and Middlestat, so maybe not the greatest. Middlestat has his own name value. He's not with any of the big 3. However, the thing that keeps my eye on him is he is back on power play 1. I know they kind of shift everything around, and even though Thompson and Skinner are cold, they are still Thompson and Skinner. If they ever get hot again, that spot on the power play could be golden. So really right now is that he's playing well, and he has a nice spot that really much to say is that he's probably, unless someone was really desperate, not cut. But I feel like at this point, I'd be comfortable putting him back into my offensive spot. Maybe in the busy days, I would be maybe a little bit more open considering starting him, on your Saturdays, depending on who else you have. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, Greenway and Middlestat have been generally playing pretty well lately, so the line seems to be working out for them.
Okay, and continuing on our hot streaks, we got someone that, I'll be honest, until the start of this hot streak, I couldn't tell you what a hockey team he's on, so take it away.
Well, embarrassingly, he's on the hockey team I follow, and I'm not even sure I was really noticing him up until a couple weeks ago. But Bobby McMann of the Toronto Maple Leafs is riding a hot streak of 6 goals, 13 shots, 14 hits in his last 4 games. So obviously a bit of a shooting percentage bender there, but still bringing the value in total amount of shots and hits. And he's kind of gone from a tweener, healthy scratch third, fourth liner, earning extra minutes, and now a promotion to play. Initially slated to be with Tavares and Nylander, but then for most of last game, he was actually playing with Tavares and Robertson. And as part of that as well, I mentioned earlier in the show, a bit of a juggling of the power play lines. So Tavares is now kind of on a power play 1B or 2, depending on how you want to think about that, and also playing with Robertson there. Yeah, McMahon is an interesting feel-good story for the Leafs. Again, coming out of this Rielly suspension, turning around the next game, putting in a hat trick, and following it up with a few more goals after that. Definitely, I would say the team and the fans are behind him, and he seems to have earned some goodwill with the coach and more ice time. So if the league is deep enough, I'd say definitely go check him out and see if you can fit him in.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially, he may not be doing as well as previous years, but anyone playing with Tavares is interesting to my point. So I'm with you on that. And going with our last hot streak is Bowen Byram. He was actually on a pretty long cold streak, not really getting any points, not doing much on the hits and blocks. But interestingly enough, and with all defensemen, it feels like it's kind of a roll of a dice when they're on a hot and a cold streak, and he's on a mighty one. We're not counting about the game that he's playing right now, so the 3 previous games, he's on a 2-point game streak. 3 games in a row, he's had a 2-goal game, followed by a 2-assist game, followed by a 2-goal game. And the interesting thing enough is that he's kind of on, I would call what the third pair is. They have so many good defensemen, you could call that like a second pair anywhere else, but basically just from time-wise. And he's on power play 2, which is kind of a weird 3 defenseman setup. He has like, I think it's Taves and Girard are the other defensemen there just because of how many they have. So I feel like this is kind of, kind of the streak. I wouldn't be really rushing to pick him up, to be perfectly honest, because while he is playing on a hot team with, anytime you have a chance to play on the same ice as McKinnon, you're going to fall into points no matter how well you play, and he is a good player. Honestly, the way I would look at it is that unless he has a 4-game week or there's a situation where maybe he's played against, weak opponents. I'm not sure what the schedule is right off the top of my head, but if you see, a Columbus or Ducks or something coming up, maybe I might be a little bit more interested. But other than that, this streak could probably just shut off as quick as it turned on. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I agree with something that was said earlier in the season on the show about Byram, in that, he's valuable when Makar is injured, but when Makar is healthy, it's really not, consistent or sustainable in the same way. And as I look back through his last 10 or so games, including these games where he's put in 2 assists, 2 goals, 2 assists, he's only broken 20 minutes of ice time once. And for a defenseman, that's really a threshold for me that, like, I want a defenseman who's playing more than average of the 6 defensemen on the team. So yeah, only 1 game above 20 minutes, a few games with no shots at all, a few games with only 1 shot. His most, even in this hot streak, it's only 2 shots a game, not a lot of other peripherals. Really struggle to see it as more than just a little blip or a little flash in the pan. Someone he reminds me, kind of in the opposite sense, who's been cold recently, is a Hampus Lindholm over in Boston, who also gets, power play 2 time, but is on a big cold streak and not a lot of other value. These guys are just, the league would have to be really deep or have a really good schedule for the week for me to want to grab them, or they're, traditionally power play 1 counterparts. McAvoy in Boston or Makar in Colorado would have to be injured, and they kind of take over that role. And all of a sudden, then they become very interesting.
I 100% with you with that. And actually, to kind of show the other side of that coin is that I was laughing to the bank about a week ago with Samuel Girard, because he was getting, I think it was like 4 goals, or at least it was like 3 goals and assist about a week or 2 prior. I picked him up because of his 4 games. And of course, those 4 goals or 4 points came out of nowhere. And now he's back on a 4-game cold streak. So, and he's actually getting a little bit more playing time than Girard's or as Bowen Byram. So if you think you're feeling good about Byram, just look at how quickly Girard turned. So I'm totally with you on that. But the nice thing is that you talk about wanting people to play minutes. How about a certain person out of Minnesota that is getting all the minutes?
Yeah, so we also previewed this earlier in the show, talking about that 10-7 game, 10 goals for Minnesota, and Brock Faber plays over 25 minutes in that game and can't get a point, can't get a shot, only 1 hit, 2 blocks. Just a real disappointment for him, especially compared to how great he's been for most of the season. But he is now on at least 3-game pointless streak. We're coming to the end of the game, just as we're recording this right now, against Winnipeg. In this late second period, he still has no points in that one. It's a little bit of a frustrating run, but overall, I would still have a lot of faith in him and the incredible amount of ice time he's been playing as a rookie. As a top defenseman, basically usurping all the minutes that Jared Spurgeon was playing for Minnesota and then some. and racking up a lot of assists, a lot of peripherals. So yeah, just a really rough stretch the last week or so. Definitely a cold streak for Faber, but I wouldn't be too worried, and I would still try to buy him pretty much anywhere I could.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're even in maybe not the most shallow leagues, but even if someone dropped him, I would be very interested to dab him up, even with it's one of those situations, as you're saying, with all those minutes, points are going to come with especially the offensive streak they have. They got 10 goals, so while it's not nice that he didn't get anything on that, they did get 10 goals to just kind of show, that's probably about a week or probably 2 weeks of the Blackhawks worth of points. So he's on a team that with a little bit of offensive power. And to close out the cold streaks, we have a familiar face that kind of follows us along as on this Seattle. Can you close it out with this player?
Yeah, so Oliver Bjorkstrand in particular has been cold on Seattle lately. Only 1.7 shots total over his last 6 games. And Seattle has a pretty mess schedule the next coming few weeks of the fantasy regular season. So that would be Seattle's very egalitarian with how they distribute the minutes and the deployment in general. I would have a hard time hanging on to a player like Bjorkstrand after this cold run and the schedule not really working in his favor. I don't know what you'd think about that, Shams.
I'm with it. It's that honestly, it's the way I look. It's the way I look at my forwards is I want top line, top power play, whatever, as much as possible. And as I was saying, even with like a Tarasenko who was like even performing, he wasn't really like that interesting to me just because of the timing and whatnot of just how much he was going to see the ice. And unless you're maybe a McMann, and I might throw in Veneers there as well, is that it just feels like any forward on Seattle is basically playing like a second or third line just because of the time they get. They don't stack a power play, so you don't really have anything. So while that's nice for the whole team, because at any point anyone can go on a bender, there's no real way to be predictive of it. So I am hesitant, especially to hold those, as I said, other than maybe McCann and Beniers, ride it for a hot streak, drop them as quick as you picked them up on the cold streak. So I'm with you on that. And I said that was going to be our last point, but just to give another head up with the Capitals game finishing, is that we got a hot streak. It's a name that we brought up so many times at the start of the season of what's going on with Ovechkin. Well, no one's complaining now. He has 8 goals in his last 8 games, which is, to be like, hey, it's Ovi. He scores goals. Why are you caring? Well, he had 8 goals prior to this in his last 43 games. So it took him 8 games to double his goal amount. So hopefully you're in a better position than me who traded him away, and you can look back and be like, hey, anything could happen. But if you ended up grabbing him, or I think Lewis on our show is stead pat with him, is that you're getting rewarded, and especially with that playoff schedule coming up, it looks like he's off to the races, and that top line with having Strome and Oshie are now hot commodities, getting assists on his points, because I know at least on a power play, both of them got assists. So basically that top line with Ovechkin is now hot and going there. So if you have him, congratulations. And if you don't, see if, depending on how shallow your league is, I was able to pick up Oshie off a waiver wire because of a bad week. So, there might be some gold in those hills that you could find with Ovi back online. And with that, we close the show. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to follow us at Short Shifts KK, as well as Brian and Elon on the main account, Keeping Carlson. Please use GameDayTweets.com to get all of the best info from Twitter and without having to go there. I am on there all day, so you don't have to spend one more time seeing the random 15 different Elliot Friedman saying, Saros got traded to the Ducks or something like that. So let me give you the right information and just go to that website and you got it there. And with that, we have our info was grabbed from Yahoo, Frozen Tools, ShiftChart.com, Icy Data, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.